Well, it's supposed to, if you focus on the right parts of the brain, you can experience like the Buddhist form of enlightenment. Well, when I say enlightenment, though, I'm not talking about the profound experience that a person has in the moment when you have the realization, but the feeling that you should have afterwards, right? So that's very difficult to achieve. So if you're able to achieve that, that profound deepness, that groundedness, feeling grounded, tranquility, peace, liberation in your everyday life, that would be the goal after you have the blowout experience. It's one way to look at it, but you don't have to have a blowout experience to have to have that permanent sense of peace of mind. That can happen gradually, and you can fall into that without having a blowout experience.
So there's different kinds
of enlightenment.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But all forms of enlightenment has the same essence. There's something about it that when you recognize it, you know that it's it, and it has the same essence. But there's different types of enlightenment.
How many different types?
Gosh, how many flavors of ice cream is there?
A lot.
Maybe the same amount when it comes to enlightenment. That's why no one ever agrees. One of the reasons why no one ever agrees, because in a sense, people are talking about different things. And also too, if you do different types of meditations, if you stuck to a certain meditation for 40 years, that type of enlightenment, if you reach enlightenment, it's going to be different than another type. So it gets a little tricky. So it depends. Like with me, I'm meditating in alpha, I'm meditating in theta, I'm meditating in delta, I'm meditating in epsilon, I'm meditating in the default mode network areas, I'm meditating in iota, I'm meditating in gamma, hyper gamma, lambda. I'm also experiencing with mu. Mu is another one, which I don't know if that's the name of it. That's what I named it, only because it's one of the next letters on the Greek alphabet, so I just took it. But a proper academic is probably going to give it, maybe mu is not the name, but I'm experimenting with all these different things. So I've experienced, from an awakening standpoint, spiritual awakening standpoint, I've experienced many different types of awakenings, right? Many different types. And I can go through them if I can. I'll go through them in a second if I can. But the blowout experience, the final one that I had, I shouldn't say it's final because there's probably more to come. But what felt final to me back in 2019, it was like the combination of all the different various forms of enlightenment all in one. So it was the everythingness and it was the nothingness at the same time. It was like the full non-dual experience. So it was like everything that could possibly happen within an enlightenment experience could happen. It's at the point now that after I had that experience, I did have another spiritual awakening last year, almost about a year ago. We're in August? Yeah, it was last year, August. And I no longer call those experiences enlightenment experiences. I just call them awakenings. Because what happened in 2019 was so profound, I can't call anything enlightenment after that experience. So I just call them spiritual awakenings. So I will say from the standpoint that there are different types of spiritual awakenings. From that standpoint, there's different ones, and there's different types of awakenings in different levels of consciousness. So you can have a certain type of spiritual awakening in the physical, in the gross realm. You can have different types of spiritual awakening in the we call them nature mysticism. You can have it in the state of there's nature mysticism. There's what's after that. There's psychic mysticism, which kundalini, the traditional form of kundalini awakenings, would be put in that category. There's subtle mysticism, and then there's causal mysticism. But the main goal is the main goal should be for the person who wants to go all the way is to have a non-dual, non-dual mysticism. So there's stuff that can happen in the gross level. That's the physical level. I shouldn't even call that an awakening, but your body can go through a type of awakening that's awakening to the body itself. That could happen. I wouldn't necessarily call it spiritual, but an awakening type can happen within the body itself. And that could be sexual, and that has a list of other things that could happen in that part of the body. Then you can have the nature mysticism, which there's spiritual awakenings in that category. And in nature mysticism, you can have the experience of what it means to be truly human. So you can have an experience what it means to be truly human, like really authentically human. And that's a profound divine experience. But it's nowhere close to the ultimate non-dual experience. But that experience alone is very profound. It can change your life if you just have one of these experiences. And that experience, again, you can know what it means to be authentically human. And in that experience, you can have the full experience of being what it means to be human and not experience God whatsoever. It is divine, but you wouldn't necessarily have the experience of what it means to be the mind of God. But in that experience, it doesn't matter. And while you're in it, that part doesn't matter. The point is, you realize how human you actually are, and that is very profound. So that could happen, but within that nature mysticism, what could happen is that could be an experience where you experience all what I spoke about last time, all human atrocities. It could be nature, where you can experience nature as it is, like Mother Nature. You can experience being different types of animals. You can experience being just one type of animal. So one time I had an experience where I cracked out of an egg and realized I was a chicken. That's how it was so profound. Like being a chicken, being a chick, cracking out of an egg. That was so profound. I cried tears of joy, realized I was a chicken. That could happen. Or it can bounce from animal to animal, or you can have them simultaneously where you experience all animals. That could happen. You can experience being a tree. You can experience being just a speck of sand. You can experience being a blade of grass. You can experience just being a drop of water, just dropping off.
So what in these experience? What part? This is the nature mysticism.
Yeah, that's the nature one.
So for somebody who is kind of neurotic but very ardently spiritual seeking, what is the awakening that is best to strive for?
I can't say which one's best to strive for. None of these things I actually try to strive for. They just happen. So where you're at in the levels of consciousness is what's going to happen. So in these moments, you can tell where you're at in terms of the levels that you're at, especially if you're.
Is there a way? I mean, does that mean that you shouldn't try?
You can if you want. You can make that your goal. But I would say, why limit yourself? Why limit yourself to the nature mysticism when you can move up? Because if you're moving up, you're probably going to experience all these things anyway. All right. So I wouldn't tell a person, focus on the nature mysticism and that's it. Because then you're going to lose that on the causal, you're going to lose that on the psychic, and you're going to lose that on the non-dual. Well, I'm saying this, but it's not like you have a choice per se of what happens on the journey, right? That's the touch of grace. If the touch of grace decides that that's what you're going to have, that's what you're going to have. But at the same time, you're no different than the touch of grace. You are the touch of grace, the very thing that is touching to allow you to have these experiences. But these are things that can happen. And it can go all over the place. You may end up having non-dual, and then the next time you have a nature mysticism experience and so on. So it doesn't have to be in order. All right, these are just things that your body has to go through because you're made up of different bodies, and each of your subtle bodies can end up having an experience which will dominate everything else within your being. So these are things that can happen in the nature mysticism. You can even realize that you're a rock and have the experience of a rock, or and that could be non-dual in the sense that there's you and you are one with the rock. So that's a form of non-dualism, but it's not the ultimate non-dualism. But you can have the experience of being a rock. And then you can feel everything the rock is feeling, and you will know what the rock has gone through since the beginning of its formation. That can happen.
Even if, is that saying that a rock has consciousness then?
The rock itself doesn't have consciousness, but
So
the rock is, God is playing the role of the rock. So you can experience, in a sense, what the soul, quote unquote, is playing the role as the rock. You can have that experience. But the rock itself is just the rock. But it's playing the role of a rock. But as you're walking around, the rock is not like witnessing you walking by and saying, oh, look at that human being, thinks he's human. The rock's not doing that. But God, from the standpoint of playing all the roles, he's playing all the characters and playing all the props.
wants to be a
But
rock.
you may have a nature mysticism experience, and you'll believe that the rock has consciousness. That could happen. But you at some point you realize that you're stuck. That's not really necessarily the case. But a lot of people who have these beliefs, that's because their tradition is built on having those experiences, and they believe that the water and the rock and everything that has conscious is conscious and is aware of everything that's going on. There's some truth to that, but that's more of magical thinking. But the rock itself is consciousness. Yes, the rock itself is consciousness, but I don't believe necessarily the rock has a consciousness that realizes that you're walking by and things of that sort. At least to that degree. But if you go deep enough and whatever, there is a consciousness of the rock. But it has nothing to do with the rock at that point, if you know what I mean. It's just consciousness. No? Yeah, it's just consciousness. And consciousness can interact with consciousness, and you have information of what the rock's gone through. So it's not necessarily the rock is speaking to you and saying, I used to be lava, and then I became hard and became a rock. It's not doing that. But consciousness can tell you where the rock has been, the history of the rock. Consciousness can tell you that.
I'm having a hard time following about nature and mysticism.
What about it? Let's see if we can make it more clear, if I can.
Well, I have not really had any of these experiences.
Most people haven't, though. You're not alone. But you can have these experiences.
But it's very hard to understand them if you haven't.
No, you don't need to understand anything. Once you have the experience, you'll understand. I would never understand this if you just told it to me. I have to experience it so I can make.
So you understand how I don't understand.
Yeah, so I totally understand you not understanding. I don't see how anyone would really. There's people who say I understand. Yeah, you understand it intellectually, but it's not the same as having the actual experience. So I don't expect anyone to really understand this unless they actually have the experience. But again, you got to put in the work. We're talking about years and years and years of meditation. At least it could happen by accident, or touched by grace. But you got to put in the work. A lot of people are magical thinkers and expect that they're just going to fall into these states. Yeah, it happens for some people. That's true for some people, but for most of us, we're talking about years and years of work. That those nature experiences never even happen until 5, 6, 7 or 8 years in. Yeah, so that took a while.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about your stand-up comedy.
Here?
Say
that for another bit.
The thing is, let me speak.
Go ahead.
I am an autobiographical cartoonist.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I started meditating about 15 years ago. As a cartoonist, I sort of built an identity from a very young age in a sort of way to as a defense mechanism, I think, in a way.
Okay.
I was curious about your stand-up comedy because that's more of a straightforward, direct way to do it, but it's a sort of thing where you are an artist, you're going through life, and in your mind, you're making commentary on everything that happens to you. And then you go back over it and you refine it and you make it a story for somebody else. And it's got to be kind of a defense mechanism, I guess.
Defense mechanism in what way?
A way of processing reality and creating a sort of shield. And I think I'm understanding, but a shield against what? Just so I understand, a shield against. So far, I think I'm agreeing. Well, I think that most cartoonists, autobiographical cartoonists, we're a very neurotic bunch, and I would say we're sort of a wounded bunch. We're sort of trying to,
just like comics, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of like you're protecting some kind of wound or something. And it's a way of, it's like there's like constantly the ego is detaching itself from reality in order to comment on it and like take things that are meaningful and sort of creating in a way an alternate reality. So in a way I was creating a identity with, this is how I made my way in the world. I didn't have very much as a young person, but I had that, and it helped me to make money, and it also helped me to create a name for myself.
Yeah.
And then when I was in my late 30s, I had this sort of semi-kundalini experience, which kind of dismantled.
Late 30s? How old are you?
I'm 46.
For real?
Yeah, we talked about this last time.
Did we?
I'm not very
remember.
Sure.
I don't even remember. You look so much younger.
Yeah, I thought you were like at least like 34 or something.
Wow.
I'm very childish.
That's amazing. Okay. Threw me off. Okay. Sorry, continue.
Well, yeah. So then when I had this kind of, I mean, I don't know if it was I don't know. It was some kind of experience that made me sort of question everything. And it kind of made me lose my ambition to create this world of comics and to sort of, I feel that like about the 7 years ago that happened, in my mind, I have been dismantling this sort of fake identity that I've created. It's not fake. It's sort of based on myself.
Yeah. Like a persona.
Yeah. I've had this sort of, not even like halfway dismantling it and halfway fighting against dismantling it. But I'm no longer what I was. I like, there's some, like I had this glimpse of something bigger. And I wonder, like, I related to you because you are an artist of sort, and there's not a lot of spiritual teachers that are artists.
Well, no, I think there's quite a bit. Maybe not stand-up comics, but there's some visual artists.
But comedy, especially, I just wonder if you also had to go through in a thorough way of sort of dismantling this identity of yourself as a stand-up comic. Because I think that for me, I'm clinging to this identity as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps, like, even as I meditate, there's like this, there's a...
like a boomerang effect? You throw the boomerang and it comes right back at you? Or is it like a rubber band? You pull the rubber band and if you let it go, it just snaps and hits you.
Constantly this talking in my head that's like coming up with ideas, coming up with like stories to tell people, like just like constantly talking to other people, like talking to different podcasters or talking to friends or talking to an audience, or like sometimes it's fantasizing and sometimes it's talking to a fake therapist, you know, like, but it's like this constant talking in my head that is trying to create this separation, really.
Yeah.
I can never really let go of that, it seems, or almost never. Moments.
Well, you can do it. You can do it. And to answer your question, yes, I've gone through the same thing, and at some level, I probably still do. So I don't necessarily cling on to the idea of being a stand-up comic anymore, but when I go to sleep, I still dream that I'm in the comedy clubs performing. It still happens. Happens at least twice a week. I'm still in the comedy clubs performing. It's like that's the part I can't shake. But I'm not trying to shake it. It is what it is. I'm not trying not to be a stand-up comic. I'm just embracing everything I've ever done in my life. So it's about embracing it. I don't think you should go in the route of trying to let go of it, because it's part of who you are. It's a talent that was given to you, and you should embrace that talent if you can, if you feel the need to. But instead of trying to fight it and trying to let go of it, I would just embrace it. Right? It's a character anyway. right? If you end up having the experience of a non-dual experience, if it comes to that level, it's not necessarily in that moment you let go of everything. You have to surrender everything. You have to surrender your soul. You have to surrender yourself. You have to surrender your ideas, your beliefs. You have to surrender your you have to surrender love. You have to surrender every possible defense mechanism that you have to let go of in that moment. But it doesn't mean you can't take them all back once the experience is over. Now, certain things falls away naturally, certain things fall away naturally. But you don't have to burn energy trying to let go of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Continue being who you are. Is that saying before enlightenment? What's the saying again? Before enlightenment?
Wash the dishes, do the
Well,
laundry.
you can make it like that, but was it chop wood, carry
Do
water?
your chores.
Yeah, you're still going to do that after enlightenment. All that stuff is still going to happen. So before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. None of those things necessarily change. What changes is that you realize who you actually are. And then as time goes on, there may be some other changes. And there's some things that won't change because that's part of the psychological development. That's a separate thing. You have to go through psychological development to let go of other things that you may find that's detrimental to you or to others. But that has really nothing to do with enlightenment. Enlightenment is realizing that you are, well, there's different ways to look at it. It's the realizing who you actually are, realizing the true self. And the true self is, if you want to put a term to it, is God. Or you can look at it as not being God, because they're all true. What is God? Does God exist? Yes, no, maybe, maybe not. So your experience is to have all four of them. Yes, the no, the maybe, and the maybe not. All four of them is an existence in itself. And when you realize that, you realize that you are everything and nothing at the same time. You can continue being a cartoonist. You can continue being all those things. It has nothing to do with you realizing who you actually are.
So how did you move, like, did you stop doing comedy?
I stopped doing comedy, but I didn't stop doing comedy after an awakening. I stopped doing comedy almost 2 years into meditating. So I didn't actually have a mystical experience at that point. At that point, I've never had a mystical experience. I didn't have my first mystical experience until like 5 years later. Oh, am I freezing?
Sometimes.
Oh, for real? How many times has that happened?
I mean, like a couple, but it wasn't that bad. Like it's just like it'd be like
just little glitches.
Little good glitches? Okay, I'm gonna fix that.
And now you've disappeared.
I'm like out of there, right? No, I'm gonna fix that. I should have plugged the stuff in. I didn't think about that.
Because isn't it like raining? Isn't it like a storm in Toronto? So like,
is there a storm? Oh, it's
yeah,
raining,
it's like,
isn't it?
There's one brewing. I don't know if it's raining on your side, but
yeah, no more glitches from this point on. From this point on, yeah, end all glitches. All right, cool. Let's do this. Yeah, yeah. I didn't have a mystical experience when I first I started meditating. I did it every day. I was still performing and doing all my stuff, but there was times I couldn't perform because I was going through some stuff. So even though I never had a mystical experience, at that point I was going through like kundalini syndromes. So like one day I woke up and I had I had the fear of the outdoors. I couldn't go outside, so I couldn't go outside for a week. So I had to cancel any gig that was happening that week. That's true. All those type of things would happen. I'd wake up in my sleep drunk or high. That would happen. I wake up in my sleep in pure bliss. That would happen. Or I'd be sleeping and I have lucid dreams. Those things were happening, but I never had an actual mystical experience until 5 years later.
But that was before or after your kundalini experience?
Well, what I considered to be like the traditional kundalini experience didn't happen until after the non-dual experience, moments after the non-dual experience on that day, December 14th. All of it is all kundalini, right? But if we're talking about the traditional form, what people call kundalini, that didn't happen to me until 16 years later. Right? That happened immediately after the non-dual experience.
But you had kundalini syndrome before the...
Yeah, I've been going through kundalini syndrome for all these years, yeah. And so the fear was it agoraphobia? What's it called? Agoraphobia? What's it called? I don't know why I can never remember these things. But yeah, for a week, I couldn't go outside. I was frightened, like shitless, like could not go outside during that week. So all these crazy things were happening, either good experiences or terrible experiences were happening. And I had a lot of great experiences, which I would put them in the meditative category of meditation experiences, like states of jhana. Well, jhanas weren't happening yet. Samadhi wasn't really happening yet. Yeah, it didn't happen yet. But I had all these weird like sensations in the heart, sensations in the head, lucid dreaming, cosmic sex, like cosmic orgasmic explosion happening internally. All those amazing things were happening, but I didn't have an actual awakening of any kind until 5 years later, which was in 2008, spring of 2008. So at that point, I already stopped doing stand-up. I woke up one day and I just lost the urge to do it.
You lost the urge to do it.
Yeah, I just never went back. So technically, I haven't actually officially quit yet. I just never went back.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't even tell anyone. Just one day I just disappeared and no one's ever seen me again. Kenny Robinson, who's my mentor, who's also Nathan's mentor, when I came into the workshop that day, it was his first time seeing me after how many years? I just disappeared.
Do you think of going back?
In my dreams, I do. In my dreams, I'm still it. But I've only had one urge of going back. That was about Nathan. You remember that time we had that experience? I'm not gonna get into too much, only because it was a sensitive event that happened. Remember that time we left the agency, and there was that woman that was going through whatever he was going through. A few days later, at that point is when I wanted to go back to comedy. So that was about how long ago? 7 years ago?
Something like that, like 5 or something.
It was more than 5. Definitely more than 5 years. Because there's certain people I haven't met yet at that point, and I've known them for at least 6 years. So that was probably about 6, 7 years ago.
Something like that.
During that moment, 6, 7 years ago, I had the urge for a quick moment, and I called one of my comedy guys. I called up Gavin Stevens, who's a famous stand-up comic here. I called him up. I says, "Yo, I'm going to come back into stand-up," and I never called him back. And he hit me up. He's like, "I thought you said you're going to come back into stand-up." I'm like, I lost the urge again. That was probably like the only time. But other than that, I've never had the urge to come back.
So funny. You're like, when you quit comedy, you don't need like a 2-week notice.
You just leave.
You just
If you don't have any gigs lined up, you can just leave, right?
No, you're both comics.
But I was still getting calls though. My booker would still call me for gigs. I would turn down all the gigs. So you had to find someone else to do the gigs, whatever. So after a while, you stopped calling me. But I didn't really say anything to anyone. I just left.
Did it bother you that you didn't feel the urge anymore?
No, it didn't bother me. What bothered me though, what bothered me was how people would see me. Right? Because when I went back out in the world, even though I stopped doing stand-up, I still did TV appearances. I was still doing some TV appearances because I was still getting calls to do guest appearances and interviews because of being a TV show host and comedian. So I still went out and did those. Even up till when I started working in nonprofit, I still did them. And then after that, those faded away, and I just slowly stopped, and I was just out of the scene. They would play episodes of my show throughout the years, and then after, at some point, that all stopped. I still collect checks, though. I still get checks in the mail from commercials and TV movie appearances that I've made. I still get checks for like $4. So they still come to yeah, but other than that, I have no other ties to it except for just working with Nathan and a group of other people recently, which I've been doing recently. Because comedy is still a love of mine. I love comedy. It's just to do it professionally, I didn't have the urge, and plus I was a really dirty, edgy type of comic. So since all these other stuff has changed, to me to go back to doing that, because it's what I know, it'd be very difficult to do that because, you know, I've been working with families and kids and whatever. I can't go back and do that. So, you know, that's probably one reason why I just don't bother to go back to do it, because what if they saw me in the club? You know, I mean, they're gonna have a different opinion of me. So I just stopped all of it altogether. Right? I can still go on and still be who I am off the stage, I'm just not making money off of it.
Mm.
And I'm not sitting at home writing material all the time to make sure I have polished material. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'll leave that for Nathan.
I used to be very ambitious, and I think I was very ambitious because I was very angry and I wanted to prove something or prove myself.
Yeah,
And
like we all did on some level.
And that was a sort of drive for me. I worked very hard from the fuel of the anger, and I think at some point I stopped being quite so angry, and I stopped being ambitious proportionately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's this other kind of motivation, which is love, compassion, wanting to give something.
That's what you feel now, right?
No, not necessarily.
Don't feel those things?
Well, I do, but not as intensely as I used to feel the anger.
And would you want it to be that intense?
Yeah, I actually do.
Oh, I feel you. That's the urge, right?
I like intensity. I feel that I'm sort of in between. Like, I don't have that angry drive, but then I don't really have the loving drive either. It's like a middle place. But
It's probably more neutral at this point.
Yeah. Yeah,
Do you feel empty because of it?
Somewhat, yeah.
You want more?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I feel
when you're meditating, you probably need to focus on the heart more.
I do actually.
Oh, you do that. You're doing that anyway. Okay.
That's my specialty, actually. I have been for about a year and a half, and that was really hard for me to come to because people would tell me to meditate on the heart, and they would tell me to feel loving feelings, and like, well, it was in the Buddhist circle, so they tell me to practice metta, and it really made me very upset because I didn't feel anything there. Like, it was very, like, it would sort of make me feel angry, but it was a long process.
It was a long process, right?
Yeah, it was a very difficult process because I didn't even, know what love looked or felt like. But I'm working on that, the heart, very much so. But I'm still like in the middle. I still just like, I'm very slow and dense and stubborn.
And stubborn, right?
Yeah, whenever somebody gives me advice, the first thing I do is fight against it.
Well, keep using Yinnergy, because in Yinnergy, at least the last 40 minutes of it.
You just told me some advice, and I was already doing that.
Well, continue doing it, because it's going to take a while. But you're meditating mostly in Delta, and Delta is the frequency for love and compassion. Another one is Gamma. We can talk about that later if you want to try a Gamma one, maybe twice a week, where that can help you. Here's the thing. When I started doing Gamma, when I was doing Holosync, and I started doing Gamma, shortly after is when I went to nonprofit. But it's not like I felt this burst of love or anything like that. I just felt the need to go in that field. I didn't look at it until years later and said, oh gosh, I actually got into nonprofit and working with youth and family after listening to Gamma. All right, so that's my speculation. I can't prove that's the case yet. It's a speculation, but that could be the case.
I don't want to cook. I don't want to go work at a soup kitchen.
I'm not saying that would be your calling. I don't want to work in one either. But
I want to do my comics still.
Who's got jokes now, Nathan? Right, but you're not going to be obligated to start working in one just because it's available. You're going to do what's really true in your heart, whatever that is. Even if it means licking the wound of people with leprosy. If that's your thing, that's your thing. There's people who do that, right? Like, I'm sure before their enlightenment, they weren't thinking about doing that.
Yeah, I don't see the value in that, but
or at least not yet. Never say, yeah, you never know. You never know. There's a lot of things I said I'd never do, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at me, I'm doing it right now. I never thought I would work with kids with disabilities. I never thought I would ever do that. I do it now.
Mm.
All right. There's no way. If you told me this 20 years ago that I'd be working with kids with disability, I would not believe you. I'd slap you in the face. There's no way. Like, I am not working with kids with disability. I'm not doing it. Right? But now I do it. All right. And I do it with almost, I should call it semi-joy. I do this with semi-joy. Right? This is what I'm supposed to do at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's different for everyone. It's totally different for everyone. I never thought I'd work in nonprofit. I never thought I'd be working with marginalized youth and families. I never thought that would ever happen. I never even thought about it. I knew I wanted to mentor people. That I knew, but I didn't know that I'd be doing that. Totally different from me doing stand-up and all the stuff in the entertainment business.
Mm.
Right? It's different.
Yeah, I wasn't really just saying that was the thing that you should be doing or that I should be doing or anything.
Oh no, I didn't even take it that way. I just found it funny. Yeah, it's all good. And I've never worked in a soup kitchen, so I don't know what that's like. So apparently, so based on how you made it sound like it's terrible. So I definitely don't want to do that.
That's supposed to be
especially
fun.
In this heat. No soup for you. I don't want to be the soup Nazi. I don't want to be that guy.
You worked at a soup kitchen?
I never want to be that guy. If I ever worked at one, shoot me, please, Nathan. Take my gun and shoot me.
Man, I thought the soup was free. No soup for you.
No soup for you.
I haven't eaten in 3 days.
Classic
no soup
episode.
For you.
No soup for you. Yeah, I don't want to be that guy. That guy's miserable as hell.
Oh,
that's funny. But what else you got, Gabrielle? What else you got? You still want to know the different types of enlightenment, though. If that's not a concern to you right now, you don't have to worry about it. But that's where you're heading sometime.
It's pretty over my head, and you listen. I wrote down. You got psychic, subtle, causal, non-dual, gross, nature, mysticism.
Yeah, and non-dual has levels too. So even though you have non-dual has a set of levels as well. So it gets really. There's a lot of information that it would go over most people's heads because just the idea that non-dual has other levels in itself, it's too much to handle. But even non-dual has its own levels, and they're named too. So there's Tirya Tita, and there's all these other levels too. That's Tirya this and Tirya that. Let me see if I have it here on my phone. Oh, I have my phone off. Hold on, let me turn my phone on for a second. See if I can pronounce these words. I'll read it off to you. Let's see if I can do this. Just give me a sec. I'll just talk in the meantime. But yeah, they all have their levels. And nature, mysticism, causal, and subtle also have their levels too. They're not just all one thing. They have their levels. This is why it's so hard. If you get 10 people in the room who had spiritual awakenings, like genuine spiritual awakenings, you may have 10 people in the room that don't even agree. Right? Yeah, I was talking to a guy, and I was telling the group that at Satori that there's nothing to see. Right? This is something I stick to, that there's nothing to see in this state. And a person came and said, "No, you never had that experience, because you do see during Satori." But again, it depends on what level Satori we're talking about, right? If you're talking about Satori, the non-dual level, the highest level, there is nothing to see, because how can you see yourself if there's no distinction between you and other, right? Because there's no you and other, you can't see nothing.
Arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, to me, doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't, not to the average person, but there was a war happening there that day in that debate. It was like, who's right and who's wrong, right? But it depends on what level we're talking about here. But at a non-dual level, if it's truly non-dual, you can't. There's nothing to see. At the same time, though, everything's being seen because you have the awareness of absolutely everything. So seeing from that standpoint, that's true. But seeing with your eyes, you can't see anything with your eyes because If I was taught through my teachers that if you see anything, that's not it. So keep going. So I kept going until there was nothing left to see. And I can attest to the fact that when you reach to that level, there's nothing to see. The light, there's a big bright light, and then you merge with it, and then you dissolve in this light, which is all consciousness. It becomes this ocean of consciousness that could be seen because you haven't merged with it yet. And once you merge with it, and you dissolve in it, there's nothing more to see. Everything else that I speak from that point on is a divine feeling. So being all universes and all creatures and all births and all deaths and all time and space, nothing's being seen there. It's all a feeling. Because God doesn't need to see itself. You know, when it wants to see, it will do what it does by creating us.
Inside of that,
characters, it will have the opportunity to see from that standpoint. But from its standpoint, there's nothing to see. It doesn't need eyes.
So there's no seeing, but is there knowing?
There's absolute knowing. There's absolute knowing. There's absolute awareness. There's absolute realization. There's absolute bliss. There's absolute truth. There's absolute beauty. There's absolute perfection. But you don't necessarily see anything physically, no. But you can have other experiences, mystical experiences, where you see a lot, where there's lots to see. It just depends on what level we're talking about. Like at the nature stage, there's things that you can see. The subtle stage, there's things that you can see. Once you get into causal, you don't see anything in causal because causal has no shape and form. And then when you reach non-dual, even shape and form disappears, yet it's there because it's non-dual.
Is this like a hierarchy, or is it more of a web, or a
more like a web, or more like a holarchy as opposed to a hierarchy? So more of a holarchy.
And where
hole within a hole within a hole within a hole within holes within holes. I went right over Nathan's head.
No, I got it.
You did not get it. Come on.
It's funny. It's like being kicked. You know, like when the guy when it's like, this is Sparta, and he kicks him over into the hole. He's going to the hole, into another hole. He keeps on going. It's like a circle of holes. He just falling through. Well, he just can't stop.
Well, look at it this way. Even though I just said it's a hole within a hole within a hole within a hole, keep in mind that in non-dual stage, all holes that are within holes are the same thing. So what I just said there is a bit of bullshit, only because how do I explain holes that are all happening all together? I can't do that. So I said a hole within a hole within a hole because in duality, that happens all the time. So like, for example, our physical bodies are only what it is because it's made up of subatomic particles, and subatomic particles are within atoms, are within particles, and particles are within atoms, and atoms are within molecules, and molecules are within cells, and cells are within tissue, and full human beings are within societies, and societies are within countries, and countries are within planets, and planets are within a solar system, and the solar system is within a galaxy. Those are what I call those are called holes. Oh. WHOLE, holes within hole within holes. Right. So that was wrong, but whatever. But you can't have a molecule without
a society,
without atoms. You have to have atoms. There has to be a group of atoms to create molecules, and there have to be a group of molecules to create cells, and so on and so on and so on. Those are called holons. HOLON, holons. That's what I meant. So the holon within a holon within a holon. So you can say holes within holes, but it means holon within a holon within a holon. So that everything is a holon. Everything within the universe is a holon. So when you have the experience of oneness, of being one with absolutely everything, you realize that you're the universe. But not only are you the universe, the universe itself is also a holon within God. Yet God is also within all these holons, and all that stuff is happening simultaneously. And that's what happens, if I could explain that with words. So holon within a holon within a holon within a holon, but at the non-dual stage, all holons within holons is the holon.
It kind of reminds me of that art. You know, the art you ever see on Instagram where they keep on going into the photo, the digital art. Where
yeah.
It's kind of reminds me of that, but it just keeps going, right?
Yeah, it just keeps going.
So what about kundalini? Where does that fit in all the different kinds of enlightenments?
I don't even consider it kundalini enlightenment. Kundalini is the road to enlightenment, at least to a type of enlightenment. But I don't even put on the level of enlightenment. But it's definitely a type of awakening, a very, 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 very profound and powerful one.
So awakening is a sort of pre-enlightenment?
I would say so, yeah. It depends. It depends on who you speak to. Some people will say when someone's talking about enlightenment, they will say spiritual awakening. Sometimes I do that. When I'm probably I'm really talking about enlightenment. It just depends on who I'm talking to. But if you want to really break it down, when you talk to most people, they will look at spiritual awakening as the partial types of enlightenment under the umbrella of enlightenment. It just depends on who you talk to. And you talk to some spiritual teachers, there's a lot of spiritual teachers who've never had experience of full enlightenment. They've had experiences of partial awakenings. But partial awakenings are freaking profound. Like that alone you can have one partial awakening that will change your life forever. You don't need anything more after that, right? Unless you still have the urge to go even deeper. But there's a lot of teachers that never reached Turiya. Most teachers are probably stopped at Turiya, which is the empty witness, the divine witness that's witnessing its own divinity. But many teachers haven't reached Turiya.
Who is the teacher that has reached Turiya?
I can't say. I'm not going to sit here and say who has, because I'm not in their bodies for me to say who has and who hasn't.
What about stream entry?
Stream entry is like the beginning. Stream entry would be if you experience Kensho, which they call in Zen. So Kensho would be the stream entry, the stream that leads to the ocean that you're trying to get to. So when you have your first awakening, that's usually stream entry. And then from there, when you travel the stream of consciousness, that should take you eventually to the ocean of consciousness. The ocean of consciousness is pure, full enlightenment. But the Buddhists may argue that even consciousness itself is something, and that's not it. You have to go to the thing, to the very essence of what that thing is. They're both true. It just depends on what angle you're tackling.
Oh.
Yeah. And the consciousness, what do you believe happens after it dies?
After it dies, everything happens when you die. But everything's happening right now while you're alive. You're just not conscious of it. When you die, you realize that everything that could happen happens. Everything that when you die, if your consciousness is high enough, you experience everything that could ever happen. Everything that could happen, everything that can't happen, you're experiencing that too, and everything that could possibly happen, and so on. All of that is at your disposal.
So what happens after a person died depends on their level.
Depends on the level of consciousness, they were at when they died.
So when they die,
yeah.
So you could become fully enlightened, and then you could regress, and then become kind of dullard, and then die and in a bad way.
Well, it depends how you look at it, because none of it is a bad way from the perspective of the enlightened one who's having the experience. It's just an experience. When you're trapped in the body, you look at it as being bad or good. But from its standpoint, it's just having an experience. So there's no real such thing as regression from that standpoint. Regression is just something that we make up to say that this person regressed. But at that stage, it depends. If you die at the moment of enlightenment, like actually have a physical, because when you hit enlightenment, you have an ego death. That happens. You have an actual ego death. But if you actually had a physical death at the moment of enlightenment, that's called Mahasamadhi. All right. So Mahasamadhi is when you die, you have a physical death at the moment of enlightenment, or it may mean that you choose to die in that moment, which takes you into enlightenment.
Does that happen very often?
Sadhguru's wife died that way, apparently.
She died at the moment of enlightenment.
Yeah, or she chose to die at that moment to achieve full enlightenment.
And
so apparently she's achieved it, but didn't live to talk about it.
Interesting.
Because she purposely died for that purpose. She purposely died to be in full enlightenment. Because Sadhguru's standpoint is a human being cannot be fully enlightenment while alive. He said that's impossible. You have to die to be that. But again, it depends on what we're talking about in regards to enlightenment. But he's right. He's right, because right now, as we're talking about it, we're in the story. Right. So whatever happened to me is part of the story. Right.
Yeah.
To actually be fully enlightened, I'd have to die. I'd have to physically die to be in full true nirvana, moksha.
Yeah, I'm kind of addicted to the stories.
We all are. That's why I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to end this anytime soon.
So this means that, does this mean that some people reincarnate and some people don't?
Well, the belief is if you reach the highest level of nirvana, moksha, that you don't come back. I don't know if I believe that yet. But again, I have to experience it for myself. I haven't, we experienced it trillions and trillions of times already, but I'd have to experience that for myself. So they say you don't come back. My thing is, that doesn't matter, because if you reach full nirvana and you're now everything, well, that means you came back, because you're everything. You're everything in existence. So that means if you came back, that means if you die and you became everything, that means you are the very thing that's reincarnated. And so from that standpoint, I wouldn't believe that statement that you become God and you stay there. There's a reason why God does all this, because it's the only thing, as I said in our last conversation, it's the only thing that exists. Maybe for some time, like I'm saying, it probably would get boring, but that's a human standpoint. But don't take it literally. But after being God for eternity, you may say, you know what? Because I can do this, I'm just going to do it all over again. And even as we speak, that's what it's doing. It's realizing that it's God and it's choosing to forget again.
Yeah, it kind of
both are happening, right? Because as it's choosing to remember and not remember, it's also in its fullness God, nirvana, moksha, parahan, parahan. The list goes on with all the different names. So it's doing all this stuff simultaneously. So there is that belief that you don't come back, but that's one perspective, and the perspective is true, but it's not the only perspective. Because when you reach parahan, you're all perspectives. So that includes all the perspectives that I may or may not agree with. But they're just partial. But they're full within itself.
So you are reaching all perspectives, so you're not dying because you're these other perspectives as well?
I'm not dying because I'm on the other perspectives as well?
Well,
what do you mean?
Well, we're all connected. We're all one. We're all God. And so when you die, you're not really, you're experiencing everything else too.
Yeah, because you can do that while you're alive too. In the moment of enlightenment, while you're still alive, you can do all that. You'll understand and become all perspectives. So it's not like you're understanding a perspective. It's like, oh, that's a cool perspective. You are that perspective. But in this case, you're the full spectrum of all perspectives, and you become all that in that moment. So all of that you can do while you're alive, but you have to have an ego death to experience all those perspectives. At least all of them. You can also have a causal awakening and understand perspectives. That could happen. But at the moment of actual non-dual suchness, you become all perspectives. There's no distinction between you and the perspective. You are the perspective, or all the different perspectives. All of that is included in all of existence.
So the ego death is the non-dual awakening?
Well, I'll say that you have to have a full ego death to have a full non-dual awakening, yes.
And how do I kill my ego?
By surrendering. You just have to let go. For you to have a mystical experience, the two hemispheres of your brain have to synchronize with each other. And it may take a little bit of time with the energy to help synchronize your brain, because the energy synchronizes the two hemispheres of your brain. That's that part that people always miss. They talk about the pineal gland, they talk about the nervous system, they talk about all that, and all that stuff is true. They talk about you releasing a certain amount of neurochemicals in the body, but no one ever talks about the two hemispheres of the brain. The two hemispheres of the brain have to be synchronized.
This is very interesting. So it's like the left brain and the right brain. Is it like the yin and the yang kind of?
You can look at it that way, because it is yin and yang, left and right, male, female. You can look at it any way you want, but it's
or like
the hemispheres have to synchronize. Because if you get to the point of a non-dual experience, what's helping you have the non-dual experience is because there's no distinction between the two hemispheres of the brain.
That's very interesting.
Right. No one ever talks about. Nobody seems to know this, but I figured this out years ago.
This is something I think about a lot because, like, as a cartoonist, I'm doing writing and I'm doing drawing, and I realize I'm using two different parts of my brain, and they're very disconnected. Like when I'm thinking in words, I really have to use this part of the brain that cuts off the part that's thinking in pictures, and vice versa. Like I have to sort of like, it's like if my brain was a house, I'd have to run to opposite sides of the, like there's two rooms that are on the opposite side of the house, and I have to go back and forth. Yeah,
and now those two sides of the house have to blend. They now have to like whatever until it realizes that it's not a house. The two have to blend, and that takes the two hemispheres of the brain to merge.
So the Yinnergy would do that. It would make so that would make me a better cartoonist. In that case,
it'll make you a more holistic cartoonist. If you're a shitty cartoonist, it's probably still gonna be shit, but it'll be whole.
I think I'm kind of a shitty cartoonist.
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen your work, but something will change about your cartoons and the way how you approach them and the way how you perceive them, because you're gonna now have a new perspective that you never had before.
What does it feel like to merge the two?
I don't know how to tell it to you. It just feels like a singularity. I don't know how to put that in words. It's a singularity for sure. I don't know how to explain it. Anything that you feel on the left and anything you feel on your right all becomes one. So your perspectives, you start to share. You know when you have conflicting thoughts? Conflicting thoughts now they now complement each other. You realize there is no conflict between your thoughts. That's like the first stages of like a non-dual. It's not fully non-dual yet, but your thoughts will merge. You'll have no conflict between them. They won't oppose each other, and that's when you know that you're starting to do it. If you go deeper into the non-dual, what will happen is everything subjective will merge with everything objective. That will happen, and this goes on and on. So left and right will start to merge. Top and bottom will start to merge.
I heard you talking about that in one of your talks about the object.
This phone's gonna die soon.
Merging with the
phone's experiencing an ego death. Yeah, sorry about that, Gabrielle. Continue. Sorry, I cut you.
No, I heard you speaking in one of your, I can't remember where it was, but you were talking about the object
and the
merging
subject.
With the subject. And I thought about it in terms of, like in meditation, when you're like following the breath or whatever the object is, and like sometimes you sort of become the breath, like you sort of, the two things do merge. But I'm very curious.
That sounds like a samadhi experience.
This is something you were talking about, but I'm just very curious about the left and right brain.
Yeah, that has to do with brain. If you ever look up brain. Look up whole brain thinking, whole brain synchronization, that type of stuff. Whole brain thinking, the whole brain synchronization, because everything crosses. The way how your brain is designed and everything that you use your brain for. So like your eyes, the connections to your eyes to your brain, they cross. Your nostrils, they cross. Your arms, everything that's connected, they cross, and your legs cross. So anything on your left side of your body is controlled from your right. Anything from your right side of your body, sorry, left side of your body is controlled from the right side of your brain, and everything from your right side of the body is controlled from the left side of the brain. So all this stuff crosses. So when your brain starts to make all these synchronizations and they start to cross and then they merge, your whole body starts to merge too. So when your body, your brain's merging, or it feels like your brain's merging, your body feels like it's merging, and then your subjective and your objective point of view starts to merge.
What does it feel like when your body starts to merge?
I don't know what word to use to describe that, but when it merges, it feels like your right hand is your left hand, your left leg is your right leg, your right eye is your left eye, your right nostril is your left nostril. And then you go past that, where it's no longer about the physical anymore. You start to tap into.
I'm not usually aware of my nostrils.
Was that?
I'm not usually aware of my nostrils.
Well, you'll become aware of it. It's just they'll just become one. But then all the parts that becomes one, they all merge too. So all you have at the end of the day is just one thing. But one's not the right term because it's not one either. But they just call it a singularity. All that stuff merges and just becomes this one thing. And if you go deep enough, which is not going to probably happen.
I've been dealing, I think, with fear a lot. When I when I was 7-8 years ago, I got very serious about my meditation. I've been practicing for about 15 years, but 7 or 8 years ago, I started like really serious on the Theravada, shamatha, like an hour or 2 hours a day. Well, I think I have a lot of issues.
Well, yeah, but we all do.
A lot of problem. I mean, well, so what happened was I learned how to quiet my mind pretty quickly at first. And I could feel this silence coming up. And I got like, I'd start to have a thought, and then I'd sort of like, the thought would sort of collapse into the next thought, which would collapse. And then it was like this silence and collapse. And that was when I had this experience a while, like this sort of partial kundalini experience. And it was very frightening to me. Like it was like I was setting on fire.
Yeah.
And it felt, and it was also like nothing, like nobody had told me about this. Nobody, like I had never heard of it. And including my teachers at the time. I mean, they just didn't talk about it or know about it or something.
See, it goes right back to what I said earlier about teachers having experiences at different levels. So
yeah,
I'm talking about this stuff. They have no idea what you're talking about. They never experienced it themselves.
Yeah, but so that was quite a while ago, and since then, well, I Googled my experiences and I learned what I could on the internet.
Yeah.
And I heard a lot of horror stories, and I read Gopi Krishna's book, and I got very afraid. And I think I still, like now I can't quiet my mind like I could back then. Like my mind just chatters and chatters, like just talking and talking and talking.
That's because
and
you're still going through it.
Yeah,
you're still going through it. That's why.
Yeah.
Your process is not over yet, because you said you had a partial one. So your nervous system and brain's still trying to work through. The energy's still trying to pass through you.
Yeah, and it seems like the energy comes up, and when it does, my mind just starts trying, almost like my mind is trying to change the subject. It just starts talking about like just a mile a minute.
Yeah, it's creating distractions.
Yeah, and
which is a good thing. It probably needs to do that at this stage.
So it's what do I do with that though? Like I try to quiet it down. Like sometimes it seems like the more I try to quiet it down, the louder it gets. I guess I should just sort of pay attention to it or something.
Yeah, you learn to watch it without judgment.
And then I've been having these dreams that I've noticed, like that I'm just afraid, like the theme of the dreams, like there will be something that I want to do, but I will be too afraid. Like I had a dream I was working at a job that I hated and I wanted to quit, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And then I dreamed that like I saw these people jumping off of rocks and having a lot of fun, and I wanted to join them, but I was too afraid. It was
Are
just
you
like
outside of? I think you may have answered this before. I don't know why I don't remember. But are you doing any form of psychotherapy? Do you see a psychotherapist?
yeah, like I told you, I see a psychotherapist every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, right?
But she has had experience. I didn't mean to try to turn this into my psychotherapy.
No, that's okay. This is a good thing, because you said that your psychotherapist also had
a kundalini
experiences, right? That's
yeah.
right. And this was Saturday when you were telling me.
Yeah. Anyway, my question was, is like how you deal with how you've dealt with fear. I didn't mean to make it about my psychology.
No, it's okay. It is about you. Like this is good, right? There's people that can benefit from some of that. I still have certain fears, right? I think people think that when you have a spiritual awakening, a profound spiritual awakening, all these things go away. It could for some people, but they don't, because it's a different line of development. Why am I seeing Nathan's thumb?
Sorry, I'm getting comfortable. My
Okay,
bad.
I hope it's a thumb.
It's a thumb.
It's way too comfortable. They're like, what is that? What is that small thing on my screen?
Fight your fears, Morgan. Fight your fears.
Fight my fears. What an asshole. Yeah. So yeah, I still have certain fears, but the thing is, a person can have a spiritual awakening and still have all their neurosis and all that stuff. It doesn't mean that you have to get rid of all those things to have a spiritual awakening, and it doesn't mean that if you have a spiritual awakening, all those things go away. What happens though is, after you have a spiritual awakening, you get comfortable with all the stuff that's happening within you. You learn to accept them, or you find ways to use them in positive ways, right? So I may have certain fears. What am I afraid of? Gosh, what's one thing I'm afraid of? I'm not even going to say it. Yeah, do you know what? I'm not even going to bring it up. But next I start throwing my stuff out, and all of a sudden I'm seeing psychotherapists. Right? But
I'd love to hear what your fears are.
Yeah, but I still have them. Some of them have gone away, and the other ones I just learned how to cope with them. It's like, well, one thing, I'm not really good. As much as I can do this, I'm not much of a social person, so I'm very shy. So Nathan will laugh when he hears that, because he's like, "You're not a shy guy, whatever." Yeah, because I'm acting it every time I do it, right? But if I'm in public, talking to people is like the most awkward thing for me. I turn down a lot of parties and stuff, and people invite me to social outings. I don't go because I'm afraid to talk to people. I still have this till this very day. But if I'm confronted and people are talking to me, I will talk, and I'll get into the conversation. I'll do all the things that I need to do. But it's not something that I look forward to. I still have this to this day. I'm just now more comfortable with the fact that I'm this way, and I'm just living with the fact that I'm this way. I'm not even really trying to change it. But I can turn it on and off if I need to. Like, I have to turn it off when I'm working. Right? If you tell anyone at my work that I'm this way, no one will believe you. They'll say, Morgan is not a shy guy. Right? Nathan's laughing because he's like, he may have said this to me before. He's like, Morgan, shut up. You're not a shy guy. I'm one of the shyest guys you'll ever meet. I'm just turning it on because I've been entertaining since I was a child. I know how to turn it on and off, but no one can argue what I feel inside.
I heard some enlightened person, I forget who, talk about the feeling that they meet every person as if they're themselves, and that the whole world feels like their living room. Basically, they feel at home there, and that everybody is like their brethren. Everybody is familiar and intimate in a way.
Okay. You want to ask if that's true with me?
Yeah.
To some degree, that's true. At the other stage of that, that's also, as much as that happens in the moment of a profound awakening, that is true within the profound awakening in that moment. It's not everyone can hold that. but that's also a different line of development. So on the psychological line of development, where at the higher you go up, the different stages are, you have the egocentric stage. This is all Ken Wilber's work. If you want to look into his work, if you haven't.
Yeah, I'm a little familiar with that.
Familiar with it? So you have the egocentric stage, you have the ethnocentric stage. So the egocentric, of course, that's the selfish me, right? Self-centered, narcissism, all that stuff. That has to do with the egocentric stage. And then you have the ethnocentric stage, and that has to do with my group. That could be my race, my gender, my family, my community, my country. That can fall into the category of, or social groups. That can fall into the category of ethnocentric. And then you have world-centric, which includes all people, no matter of race, class, sex, or creed. And then beyond that, it's cosmocentric with a K. Cosmocentric, and that includes not just all people, but all sentient beings throughout the whole entire universe. Well, you can get to that stage of the whole entire universe, and that's the cosmocentric stage. So what this person is talking about, that person probably has a higher level of psychological development that after their awakening, because the awakening, that's a different line. So you have psychological development, which is that is vertical, and you have states of consciousness, which is horizontal. So these are two separate lines. So you can have the highest level of you can have the highest level of the highest state of consciousness and be very low in your psychological development. So if this person is telling the truth, this person just probably has a higher level of psychological development. Probably, it sounds like in the world-centric stage. Why they feel that way.
Interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that will happen after the moment of a full spiritual awakening.
Right.
But it does happen in the moment of a spiritual awakening. Right. After that, you come back, and you usually go back to the stage that you started off with.
Interesting.
So you have the full-blown whatever, but if you're at egocentric, you come back to egocentric. You still come back, you're still an asshole, you're still egocentric, you're still yeah, that's why he's laughing, because I'm a bit of an asshole. Yeah. So you're still self-centered and all those things. But if you're working on your psychological development, you're trying to break free from most of those things. But even if you're at world-centric, you probably still have lines of development that still needs to be developed. You can be a world-centric, but you have but you may be low in your moral lines. Could be low. You can probably still have to develop your moral lines, even though you're at world-centric, right? Because you have your psychological development, development. You have your states of consciousness, and then you have your many lines of development, and that could be ethics, that could be morals, that could be spiritual growth. Because spiritual growth would be separate from you having the highest state of states of consciousness. Spiritual growth is also its line of development, right? So people can be at different levels of spiritual growth and still have a full state of consciousness. And there's many other lines. There's what are some of the other lines? The multiple intelligences. So spatial intelligence, logical intelligence.
Still Ken Wilber's stuff?
Yeah. So spatial, logical, kinesthetic, interpersonal, spiritual, environmental or natural, if you want to put that in the category, and so forth. So all those things. So you may be high and low in certain lines of development, but you may be in any of the stages, the egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, cosmocentric. So you can have very, very high intelligence, cognitive intelligence, but have very low morals or very low ethics.
So psychological, this is interesting, like states works in a sort of vertical sense, and then like states of consciousness is a
states of consciousness is vertical. Stages of development of psychological development psychological development is vertical, and states of consciousness is horizontal.
That's very interesting. So it's like is it horizontal in the sense that it's like timeless.
No, it's horizontal in the sense that no matter what stage you are psychologically, you can still pass through and have all the states of consciousness at the lower levels. So if you're at egocentric, you can still pass through all the states of consciousness. If you're at ethnocentric, which is, so this one's going vertical and this one's going horizontal. So you can still go to the different states of consciousness at ethnocentric. You can still go to the states of consciousness at world-centric. You can still go to the states of consciousness at cosmocentric. Right? The states of consciousness, enlightenment, astral traveling, lucid dreaming, all that stuff doesn't discriminate against the level of psychological development that you're at. You can have these at these levels. The downside to that is, or the upside is, you will interpret your state of consciousness depending on the level of psychological development that you're at.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So a person that egocentric is going to have a different interpretation than someone that world-centric, even though they both had the same type of experience. So if they both had non-dual experiences, they will interpret it differently depending on their level of development. So the egocentric person has a non-dual experience. He comes back or she comes back and says, I am God. Nobody else says, only I am. That's an egocentric standpoint. The person who has an ethnocentric standpoint will say, only me and my group is enlightened, or we're the only chosen ones. We're the only ones who are God. You hear stuff like that. We're the chosen ones. Someone at the world-centric stage will say, no, all human beings are God, are the chosen ones, or whatever their terminology is. And at the cosmocentric, which is the highest level of psychological development, you say that everything is God. That's the difference when it comes to that type of interpretations in regards to what level of development you are when you have a state of conscious experience at the level of development that you're currently at. So if you have a non-dual experience, of course, in that experience, you're going all the way up and you're experiencing all that is. But when the experience is over, you come back down to your level of consciousness. Maybe things have changed because of that experience. You changed as a person, but you still carry the stage that you're at.
That's very interesting.
This is why you'll meet enlightened masters who are still chauvinistic and all that type of stuff, because that part of their psychological development hasn't blossomed yet.
Yes.
Even though they may have had a non-dual awakening.
Yeah, I've seen it more than once.
Yeah, you hear about it all the time, right? And you get confused by it. Say, how could this be? And then when you understand how this model works, you start to understand, oh, a person can have a full-blown spiritual awakening where all 1,000 chakras in the crown chakra opens up, all that stuff happens, yet still chauvinistic, still a racist. And the list goes on of all the different things, right? Because that part hasn't changed, hasn't touched much in their psychological development. But you have some people, though, where some things do cross. And when they have a full-blown awakening, some stuff in their psychological development does open up. It's just different for different people.
Some kind of connection.
Yeah, something usually does happen. But I know people I've read about who've had a full-blown non-dual experience, and they still eat meat. It doesn't mean that you're going to give it up, right? You probably still see animals a certain way, and you still eat it. When it happened to me, I stopped. Right, but that's different for everyone. Right, there could have been something I was already working on prior to why that happened. It's just that experience was the final draw that pushed me forward into that. But it could have been something I was already working on psychologically. So it gave way once that experience took place. And after, when I had the experience in 2019, I became vegan. So first I was vegetarian. I was vegetarian for years. And when that experience happened, I turned vegan. I still eat honey, though. But other than that, I'm pretty much vegan.
Yeah, honey is hard to quit.
It's very hard to quit. You know what I mean? The sweetness of honey. You know, it's bee barf, but I love it.
You mentioned you did some lucid dreaming early in your kundalini syndrome.
Yeah, lucid dreaming. I had, this was what, 18 years ago? I had 3 days of lucid dreaming. I've only experienced lucid dreaming 5 times. So 3 of those times were during that time period, 18 years ago, real intense, real mind-blowing lucid dreaming that took place then. And I didn't have another one until 2006. And it was a minor one, but it was profound. But it was minor in the sense of what took place, but it was profound in what I was able to do with it. In that experience, I was able to like take my hand, scrape it against a brick wall, and cut myself and watch it heal in front of me. So that was profound in that moment. And then, but I was on my old streets that I used to live back in the day, and I walked to my old house, opened the door to see my friend's mom, who was my landlord. I spoke to her for a bit, and I came back, and I was back in my room. And then the next lucid dream I had was recently. It was just a few months ago. I was just walking in the forest, no big thing, but just walking in the forest, touching the leaves, and realizing that the leaves felt just as real as any other leaf. But those are my 5 lucid dreaming experience. I've never had another one outside of those. I had a lot of vivid dreams, like mind-blowing vivid dreams, but only 5 lucid dreams.
I've been reading a lot about lucid dreaming and also astral projection lately. And it seems like astral projection is where you basically just get up out of your body and go to other dimensions.
If you're talking about out-of-body experience, but there's 2. There's astral traveling, there's out-of-body experiences. I put them in 2 different categories. I've done a lot of astral traveling, but I've never had an out-of-body experience. I've never left my body and looked at my body. And yeah, I've never done that.
Like when like you are in the hospital and you go up above
and floating over, and there's some kind of silver cord attached to you and your subtle body. I've never done that, but I've done a lot of astral traveling. I've done that.
And astral traveling is different from lucid dreaming
in the sense that you get to go to different planes of existence. You get to travel to different planes of existence and stuff like that. But to me, that's different. Or you can be traveling in the same existence, but I've never like felt like I left my body, looked back at my body, or looked above my body. None of that. But with astral traveling, you're traveling to other like dimensions and meeting other beings and things of that sort. And I don't talk about those things much, only because when you talk about them, people get more excited about that than the journey of enlightenment. When I'm trying to express to people that having the awakening is way more important than any astral traveling, meeting any aliens, or meeting any dimensional beings. But that in itself is a profound thing within itself. But that's not going to lead you to liberation.
It's pretty fascinating.
But it is very fascinating, extremely fascinating. But I don't talk about it much, only because people ask more questions about those than they do about the actual journey itself. But I had many of those. I actually took notes of many of my stuff that I haven't shared with anyone. I've only shared it with one person recently.
No, I just like, I suppose, like, okay, I don't know how this isn't going to sound dumb, but like, what is the point of self-realization, of enlightenment, if it isn't to to create more connection or to do good for the world? I mean, talking about like the vertical psychological states and the horizontal states of consciousness, and like enlightened people, I've seen them, like my teacher was cheating on his wife, and he was like, I mean, in doing that, he was deceiving all these people, and then ultimately he was deceiving himself. And it made me think,
why bother?
Well, not why bother, because I mean, for me, relationships, connections with other people, making life better for other people, like doing like connection with other people, it seems to be a very important thing. Relationships, as in friendships or just interactions, any kind of relationship, just making things better for other human beings.
Sure, but that has nothing to do with enlightenment.
Well, exactly. So the question is,
well, at least nothing to do with that form of enlightenment.
I mean,
that has everything to do with the highest level of psychological development, and that is beneficial for all mankind. But what is also beneficial for all mankind, the more people that are able to have a spiritual awakening and break through, they make it easier for other people who are trying to do it themselves to have that liberation. So even if that person is an asshole and his dad cheating on his wife, doing all this other stuff, whatever, if that person was able to break through and it was a genuine awakening and other people are able to do it too, they make it easier for other people to break through as well, to experience what that liberation is like, why that experience is so important. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. So they are doing stuff for mankind. It's just not in the way that the relative self would like to have it.
The what?
The relative self, because the relative self is different than the self. These are two different things. The relative self is like your ego that's playing out the role of who you are, who sees black and white, objective, subjective, goes through pains, goes through relationships, have breakups, goes to work, blah 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 blah. But then you have the self, which you get to realize that you are, and so that if you have that experience and you come back as your relative self, you're more liberated. Or at least that's the goal. You become more liberated so that you get to live your life in a way that is now comfortable to you because of having this experience. And now you know who you are. Now you lose the fear of death, and you know who you are. You realize that everything that's happening in the world is happening because it's your doing, not you as the human being, but you as the cosmic mind, the ground of all being, that you're creating it. And when you realize that you're creating it, it's not as painful as it seems to be while it's happening. So because you understand that everything's happening, the internet's unstable. Interesting. Yeah. I probably froze.
It alleviates.
Hold on.
It alleviates the. Oh, sorry.
No, hold on. Oh, yeah, I think I'm back now. Okay, go ahead. If you can. Well, the thing is, there's different stages of this awakening. So at the beginning stages, when you become realized, self-realized, and you understand that you are it, that won't free you from suffering yet. You got to go through the different stages of that because you're stripping the layers, right? So there's a saying that people always say. I can't remember what the saying is. Understanding is different from realization, and realization is different. Don't mistake understanding for realization, and don't mistake realization for liberation. Right? So these are levels that a person has to go through. So just because a person has experienced this awakening, it doesn't mean that they're now, it doesn't mean that they're all realized. Some people have the intellectual, before some people get to the level of awakening, they have the intellectual understanding of it on some level, right? But when you have the awakening, the realization, you realize the realization that the understanding comes nowhere close to the realization. And then for those who have the realization and end up being liberated, realize that the liberation or realization has nothing on the liberation that you now discovered, because these are three different things. But the liberated person has all three. They have the understanding, they have the realization, and they have the liberation. And that's the goal. And if we're able to get all people to become free and become liberated, that's the best that we can do for you. Because we're trying to free you from all this. You're trapped in Maya. We're all trapped in Maya, thinking that all this stuff is real. And I'm not saying that when you realize it's not real, it's no longer painful. It's still going to be painful. You're still going to suffer. You're still going to go through all these things. But you'll know there's a part there's a depth that you have, the empty witness that's watching it all. And in that empty witness, there is no thoughts and there is no feeling. There is no nothing. It's the neutral witness of it all, and it's experiencing everything the way it's supposed to be experienced. So you're still going through this stuff as the relative self, as the physical body, as the ego, but that part that's within you that is eternal experiences the whole thing as how it's supposed to play out.
It's interesting that you refer to this space here when you say the witness.
Yeah, I always point. I point here only because where do I go? Is it in the head? Is it in the heart? It's beyond. It's beyond.
I feel like it's around the diaphragm or the heart area. I feel it sometimes.
It's beyond space. So this witness presence, the soul, or whatever you want to call it, Atman, it's in a dimension that is not, it's free from this physical three-dimensional realm, yet at the same time is in it. Your physical body is actually a manifestation of this empty spirit, of this empty witness. So this is the physical manifestation of it. So as I'm looking at you, I am looking at the empty witness, but I'm looking at the manifestation of this empty witness, which is your physical body.
If a lion drank ayahuasca, do you think the lion will stop eating meat? Like I've been thinking about this like the whole day. I think about dumb questions, just like anything. Do you think like other animals would have experiences like that if we just like fed them that type of thing? Like I don't know. I'm sorry. This is I know it's a really stupid question, but this is what I was thinking about.
I just want to ask you: are you actually serious about this? You actually want me to answer that?
I'm dead serious because like,
I don't want to say it's stupid. I'm just going to say that I wasn't expecting that. If a lion drank ayahuasca, would it stop eating meat? No. Why would it stop eating meat?
Because it would feel like it would throw up. It would have all the experiences. It would just like, lose all this. It's like I don't want to eat a gazelle because I just can't. I don't have it in me. And then they shun him out of the group because you can't get meat or whatever. Just like I don't.
That lion would actually end up dying because that's a source of food. Like they have to eat it.
You think he would eat nuts like the alternative?
I highly doubt it. I don't think you're gonna have a vegan lion. First of all, he's not gonna fit into his group anymore. He's gonna be kicked out of his group. He's gonna hang out with the tiger. He can't even hang out with the tigers. He's gonna have to hang out with squirrels. All right, that's not gonna work. Like just I don't think there's any way around that. No, I don't think of a lion or a tiger or a bear or any of these creatures that drank ayahuasca by accident, because I don't know how a shaman's going to give it to them, that they would stop eating their source of food. A lot of us don't even stop.
I think the question, though, is kind of the question I've heard before, too, is that do animals have the potential for spiritual growth or even like kundalini? Like, does an animal have the thing that people apparently have, which is the ability to like transcend themselves and feel empathy and connection to all beings? Is that
Yeah,
I've been asked that.
Better question. Well, Nathan's question was a funny one. It wasn't stupid. It was funny. It was humorous. Let me see if I can answer them.
I need to take it seriously then.
Yeah. Does an animal have the capacity to transcend?
Hey, hold up.
To be honest, I highly doubt it. But I have met animals. I have met people's dogs where they seem like they're on a higher plane than other dogs. To be honest with you, I've seen that. If they do have the capability, well, a lot of teachers say, a lot of spiritual teachers say that what makes us so special, and it could be human narcissism on our part, that what makes us special is the fact that we are capable of doing these things that other animals can't do, that we're the only type of animal that's capable of doing that. I don't think anyone's ever proven that, and that probably also depends on the part of our brain, the cortical part of our brain that allows us to be able to reason and do all these things that we do, create tools, create mathematics, philosophy, all the things that animals can't do. If animals can't do any of that, I can't see how they would be able to transcend and reach higher planes of spiritual existence. At the same time, though, animals are at these states of a spiritual existence. They are doing that. It's spirit playing the role of a lion, or spirit playing the role of a dog or a cat. So it is doing all those things, but it may not be the role of an animal to have that potential, because that's not the role of an animal, or at least outside of human beings. At least that's what we know. And I believe there's other primates that can do that, but they all died off. The only one that still exists is the Homo sapien. So of all the different primates that were able to walk upright and were able to make tools and things of that sort, they're probably capable on some level. But at the same time, I was told that what makes Homo sapiens unique is we have the ability to imagine. All the other ones died off because they weren't able to imagine, so they weren't able to make proper tools, or they weren't able to find ways to survive during the cold and things of that nature, because that all takes imagination. And when it comes to spiritual development, as much as this sounds kind of silly, you need imagination to do it. You need determination, you need intention, and you need imagination. But not imagination in the way where you're making things up. Imagining in a way where you get to picture something in your head internally or subjectively so that you can reach a future goal, which at least in terms of the different hominids weren't able to do that, except for, I don't even know if I even said that right, because hominid, I don't know if that's only exclusive to humans or if that's exclusive to all the groups of these intelligent primates that were able to bypass their animal nature. So I can say that from that point. I have never seen an animal, or even in any experience where an animal was able to transcend itself and to see things on the spiritual plane. But one day we'll probably be surprised. Who knows? But if they can't do all the other stuff, as I said, like philosophy, mathematics, geometry, politics, economics, I can't see how they would be able to do that. But you know what? 100 years from now, someone will probably have some information and find a way to click some switch in some animal and they'll be able to do it. But I highly doubt it. But as a human being, you can have the experience of experiencing yourself as every animal. That you can do. Because we're capable of doing that.
My cat enjoys classical music though, and
sure,
she hates like punk rock music and abrasive sounding music.
Sure, they have that capability, right? But you'll never see a cat be a music critic. You'll never see that.
The cat is, though. She's
like for a newspaper, some kind of publication, you'll never see that. Something from Whiskers, I don't think that'll ever happen. But but yeah, animals do have preferences in regards to sound and music and rhythm and patterns and things of that sort.
I've heard that they don't really have the complicated nervous system that people have too. We have this.
Agreed. Yeah, that could be the main. There are many parts that makes this happen because they have pineal glands. A pineal gland is needed to have these experiences. They have those, but I don't think that's enough. But animals do have preferences. Yeah, they you play certain sounds and a cat, because cats and dogs do have egos, and they can make preferences in regards to what they like and what they don't like. They can do that. But I've never met a dog or cat who can tell me what 1 + 1 equals.
Maybe you just couldn't understand it. Just like, woo!
Maybe. 1 + 1. It's like, oh yeah, he knows. It's possible. I don't know.
I'm sorry. I thought I just started off light just to get all the nerves out, but if you guys like, please answer.
Well, it's a good question in a sense.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Because what would happen if, well, with ayahuasca, I hear there's is it leopards? There's stories about leopards eating the actual plant itself and having trippy experiences. And who knows what they're experiencing, except for like, leopard stuff. I don't know if it goes any higher than that, but who knows? I don't know.
Oh.
The problem is we can't measure subjective experiences, but we do know in regards to what animals have in terms of their brain that that we have or don't have. That we do know, right? There's a reason why we have a cortical part of the brain, a limbic part of the brain, and the reptilian part of the brain, because these are the stages of evolution, and we have these parts that allows us to do all the things that we do. If you go down the list of all the different animals, they don't have all those parts of the brain. A reptilian brain, as far as I know, just has a reptilian brain. Hence why they call that part of our brain the reptilian brain, because reptiles have that part, but that's all they have, or something like that. I'm not a neurologist, but I think I'm close. I think I am. All right, but yeah.
Oh. All right.
Yeah, just I don't know. But neurology is not it's not up my alley, right? I'm not an expert in that, but based on what I know, I don't think animals are capable of doing that. But you do have the capability of experiencing what an animal experiences from a human perspective.
What about dolphins? Because they have another part of. Okay, I'm gonna start with the animal questions.
You know what? If there's any animal that could do that, maybe it's dolphins. Maybe dolphins can have spiritual experiences. They're quite advanced. They're very advanced. Maybe they can. What I do know is, I don't know this. I read this in the book. Can't remember the book that I was reading in. That if you're giving birth by a dolphin in the same water as a dolphin, the child comes out with a higher IQ than average. They come up with a higher IQ. I don't know than the average person, but they end up having a higher IQ based on being born in the same water as a dolphin. So
is that why they have SeaWorld? So like women can just give birth and
who gives birth at SeaWorld? I've never heard of that. I've never ever heard of it. I know mothers go with their kids. I've never heard of anyone giving birth at SeaWorld. All right, so I don't know what SeaWorld you're going to, but from this point forward, I don't want to go. I watched the birth of my 3 kids. I think that's enough. But that's what I heard. I think it's based on some kind of scientific study that they've done of children that were born in the same water where dolphins were located, or something like that. There's something that dolphins can do, especially the sounds they make, that has some kind of activate some part of the brain in a child that's whose brain isn't developed yet or something. I don't know. But again, I don't know much about this stuff.
I have one more question. Do you ever think you could take dolphin sounds and put it in the meditation and just see what happens?
Dolphin sounds and put it in. I've done it before. Nothing happened.
Really?
Yeah, I've done it.
It's
a good idea, though. Maybe something that you can do for babies.
Oh.
I've done a lot of different things. Like throughout the years, I've tried many different experiments. Like even taking the sounds of different planets and incorporating into a meditation. The problem is it's just annoying to listen to, but there's probably some benefit there. Right? There's different things you can do. Different sounds can have an effect on the development of certain parts of the brain. So you can do that. The sound of the sun, I've done that. They're just annoying to listen to. To sit there for an hour, I can't do it all the time. It's one of those things you do once in a while, just for the kick of it. But I'm sure there's some kind of benefit there. I don't know if it leads to any form of growth, but it may activate something temporarily. Right? Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, he's done CDs where he incorporates dolphin sounds and stuff in his music. But he plays around with it. He takes the dolphin sounds and he makes them into binaural beats. He makes them binaural. And then he does all this other stuff where he lowers the different octaves of a dolphin sound and all that type of stuff. He does that. Yeah. All right. Now enough of Nathan. Now get into it.
Please, thank you. I was just like, what is it going to stop with the dolphins?
I heard that whales and dolphins, they evolved out of the water and became like creatures on the land, and then evolved back into the sea. Just changed their mind and went back.
Changed their mind. So they fuck this shit, and they went right back into the water. This land stuff is hard. Now I gotta build stuff. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So they started civilization, or they started to, and then they changed their mind and went back.
Yeah, who told you this?
I just probably heard it on a podcast or something. I feel like I've read snippets in weird books.
Well, this I do know. Well, I believe there's truth that something came out of the water and started to walk on land eventually. I do believe that's the case when it comes to evolution. In regards to dolphins and whales, what is true is dogs have evolved from
wolves, right?
No. I'm talking way back. Dogs evolved from. Is it from seals? From seals, if I have that correctly. Yeah, dogs actually. Seals are actually the ancestor of dogs. The person who I heard it from was a highly respected academic who was involved in evolution of animals and man. and that was his claim based on the DNA test that they studied. But don't quote me. But I heard this some years ago on TVO.
That's weird that that's not common knowledge, because they're so dog-like, or the seals are. Dogs are not seal-like, but seals are so dog-like.
Very dog-like, yeah.
It's like kind of creepy, like some kind of like animated slug-like dog or something.
Or something, yeah. So that's very interesting. There's a lot of things that same professor was speaking. It was a professor. I just don't remember his name. It was a professor who was on TVO. On Saturdays, they used to... Sorry, Gabrielle, where do you live? Where are you from?
I live in Brooklyn.
Oh, you live in Brooklyn. Okay, so you're in the States. So here we have this channel called TVO. Stands for... What does TVO stand for, Nathan?
I've
TV
no
Ontario.
idea.
TV Ontario. That's what it stands for. You should be watching it. If you watch this stuff, you wouldn't be asking these silly questions if you were watching TV.
Hey, my silly questions pay the bills. All right.
It does. I guess it pays the bills. It pays the bills. Right. But TVO is a pretty much a learning channel, and we grew up watching TVO as kids, and it still plays now. So they play documentaries, children's shows, a lot of educational stuff. And on Saturdays, some years ago, they used to have this lecture program that used to come on every Saturday. I used to watch this thing religiously. I learned so much about philosophy, evolution, neurology, just based on listening to these professors doing these lectures. And based on this one professor, which I don't remember his name, he spoke about this. He also said, if I have the same professor, he said that evergreen trees aren't trees. They're actually a weed. Evergreen trees do not grow on land that has been untouched by man. And that's what weed does. Weed only grows on land when it's touched by man. And that's what evergreen trees do. That blew my mind. I was like, what the? That was crazy. So every time I see an evergreen tree now, I spit on it. I treat it like a weed. I don't even treat it like an actual tree. One tree I would never hug. Like, F you, weed.
Like Christmas trees.
Stick with the actual trees, maple trees and all that. Those are real authentic trees. But those evergreen trees that can't die, they stay green all year round. I hate those trees.
Those are pretty special weeds, I think.
I know, true, for Christmas trees and stuff. Yeah, they're great. You know what I mean?
Is that why oh, sorry,
go ahead.
Is that why we cut them down every year? Because we just...
Yeah, I think subconsciously we know that it's a weed, so we cut them down.
So weird.
We cut them down to find a better purpose for it. Let's put some lights on this thing and whatever. Put some candy canes on that bad boy. But yeah, that's probably, I don't know. Yeah, but apparently it's a weed. It's not an actual tree.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.